The idea of a traditional moat is water around a castle to prevent attacks. However, a business moat, an idea that's popularized by Warren Buffett, it's a financial strength over competitors that prevents people from getting into the space or competing with them. Ideally, when you're choosing your businesses to invest in, you'll have at least one business moat that you can believe in to keep your return strong in the long term. With this video, we'll start with the no-brainer business moats and then transition into harder to notice and possibly stronger business moats later on. The first one that we're going to talk about is branding, and we're going to talk about Sam's Cola and Coca-Cola, where Sam's Cola for a 12-pack is $2.30 versus a 12-pack of Coca-Cola, which is approximately $5. First of all, let's say that somebody's going shopping for a party, and they have two choices. They have their Sam's Cola and Coca-Cola. Well, to them, this seems like a pretty easy choice because they want to impress their guests at their house, so they better just buy the brand name stuff since they don't want to appear cheap to all their guests. Additionally, with strong brands, they get integrated into other businesses, such as ordering at a restaurant. Because if you say, "Can I get a Sam's Cola at a restaurant?" they're going to be pretty confused and say, did you mean a Coke? Because that's probably the only thing that they're offering. The second competitive advantage is price power, and for this we're not talking about the difference in choices between Sam's Cola and Coca-Cola. With pricing power, we're talking about two identical objects which are both used in businesses around the world that have two different prices. So in this case, we're talking about the sugar that goes in Sam's Cola versus Coca-Cola. And let's say that one of them is 65 cents per pound for sugar versus the other one which is 60 cents per pound for sugar. Now when the business meetings go on and they're making their choices about what ingredients to put in and how much and where they're sourcing it from, the choice becomes too obvious with pricing power. Because if somebody says, let's buy the sugar that's more expensive despite being the exact same, everybody else is probably going to think that that person's pretty crazy. If they are two identical objects that are the exact same, how could these price differences happen? There are three different ways that I'm going to lay out in this video, the first of which is the larger scale which equals lower costs. And this can go into another video which I could make, which would be the economies of scale, where if the infrastructure behind the business is very large and they have a lot of funding behind them already and lots of assets working for them, then typically that means that the overall product that they're trying to produce will be made at a lower cost as compared to if they only had a small amount of equipment with a small team and they were just doing it from scratch. And then number two is patented equipment, which could equal lower costs. Let's say that one of the businesses that refines the sugar has a new piece of equipment that allows them to get the sugar out faster or at a lower cost. If that was the case, then that would mean that only they would be able to use it, or they could charge royalties on the other companies, which would defeat the purpose of using the equipment in the first place, which would be lowering the costs for the sugar. And then third is the location. If one company is very far away for their sugar production and they have to transport it, then that transportation distance means that it's just going to increase the cost because the other company doesn't care how far away you are. They care about the price difference between the two objects. So if two have the exact same amount of equipment and one's further away, then clearly they have to drive further to deliver that sugar to the company that they're trying to give it to. If there is so much more distance in that way, then that would mean that they would have to pay more for gas and the equipment on the transportation vehicles, which would increase the cost and defeat the purpose of trying to beat out their competitors with the lower costs. The third of our business moats is the hard to switch mode, and to this we're going to be talking about ADP. ADP is a company that integrates with many other companies around the world, and what they do is automatic data processing for things such as benefits, payroll, recruiting, and HR services. These are all things that companies really don't want to do. They either, especially the smaller companies that have to start up from scratch, they have to think about, are we going to be in charge of benefits, payroll, recruiting, and HR services, or would we rather just have a different company, such as ADP, do that for us? So at the beginning, it makes a lot of sense for new businesses to just give it to ADP because chances are doing it from scratch means a lot of headache, a lot of work, and also a lot of startup costs. However, in the long run, this means that the companies, especially as they're growing larger and larger, are going to become more and more dependent on ADP and making it harder and harder to switch away from them. Because if ADP says something like, we're raising our prices, the company might say, wait, what? You can't do that. And they'll say, okay, then leave and take care of payroll yourself. Well, fine. How much? Number 4 for our business moats is the hard to start businesses. For this, we'll talk about railroads versus restaurants. Let's start with the setting tables examples with the restaurant. And one person's trying to save up money so that he can start his restaurant business. He's obviously going to have a lot of hurdles that he's going to have to jump over. The first of which is the property for a building. Realistically, one person could save up enough money to buy a property for a building or inherit the property from a relative. Number 2 is the license to operate. Once again, that's something that is achievable for one person to save with in his lifetime. Number 3 is the equipment and groceries, also pretty achievable. Number 4 is the staff, also achievable. Number 5 is the furniture and decorations, manageable. Number 6 is marketing, also possible. And maybe some other things that I'm currently not thinking of that would just be miscellaneous costs. Now, if you look at this, for all the hurdles, those are all realistically achievable things for one person to save in his lifetime and start up for his restaurant business. Now we're going to have the same person saving up for his own business, but instead of having the American dream of owning his own restaurant, he's instead going to be in the American dream of owning his own railroad. So he's going to have some obstacles that he's going to have to jump over, the first of which is setting up new tracks across America. I think you're going to have to give up on this idea. It seems way too difficult for one person to do this, and even if he got all the permits, all the time, money, and energy, probably wouldn't be worth it. So instead, let's just buy an existing railroad business. Actually, this one doesn't seem very realistic either. I don't think he's going to have enough money saving up really hard, even if he scrapes every penny and invests it and gets incredible returns so that he can eventually buy his own railroad business. I just don't really see it as being achievable. So because it's so difficult to start up a railroad business, that is an economic moat that these railroad businesses have. Number 5 is the ecosystem businesses, and it's a bonus if it's also using subscriptions. So for this, we have Apple and Amazon, but for our sake, we'll be talking about Apple as the ecosystem business. So let's say that you've been thinking about buying an Apple product for a while, and after enough time, you decide that you're finally going to buy an Apple iPhone because you like the operating system, you like the branding, whatever it is, you managed to buy an Apple iPhone. Now, with this Apple iPhone, you might be tempted or be gifted an Apple Watch. Or perhaps you also get iPads. There's plenty of Apple products that are hardware that you could buy, but now you've been entrenched and you have 3 pieces of Apple hardware. And congratulations, you are now a part of Apple's ecosystem. As the proud owner of 3 pieces of Apple hardware, you obviously need some software as well. And where are you going to get software? You're going to get it from the App Store. The App Store is fantastic for Apple because there's tons of people that are trying to make money in the App Store that are the developers. But these developers, for the privilege of being on Apple's App Store, they obviously need to give Apple a small cut, maybe even a large cut. Then these developers who spend all their time and effort making the apps for the benefit of iOS people will just be giving money to Apple in their ecosystem. Maybe you want some more entertainment. So there's Apple TV, and you can pay a subscription service that for Apple's hardware gives more money to Apple in their ecosystem, tying you down as never wanting to leave Apple ever again. Then there's Apple Pay, which once again just is another piece of convenience. Maybe you don't want to leave Apple because you so frequently use Apple Pay. Or you have all your songs on iTunes. Or you're really enjoying Apple Arcade and you don't want to buy more apps, so you just subscribe to this service on Apple Arcade to give you the entertainment. Maybe you put all your health information in, so it's all congregated in that one location with Apple Health, and you don't feel like leaving because you find that very convenient. Or maybe you FaceTime with your family or friends. Well, if you don't have an Apple product, FaceTiming becomes much more difficult. Or maybe you use Apple Maps. Now that one's probably less realistic, but again, it is an option that ties you down and makes you want to stay in the ecosystem. With these ecosystem business models, the companies are always thinking, how can we get them to 1. Let us collect data on them, sell subscription services, or buy hardware upgrades? But they're always going to be saying, here's some lovely apps and services to go along with your new Apple device. If you're new here, subscribing and hitting the bell for notifications will allow you to see my future uploads. And if you enjoyed the episode, liking the video will help others find it as well. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next episode.